So even though you're sitting there, you're logging into your investment account and you're looking at the balance go up. And, historically it's been about 8 to 12, 15% on a good year, but you're losing 35 or 40% or more, actually 45% to Bitcoin. And I just think that if you look at the incentives and why that is, like why people think that this is such a risk to invest in. And I think going back to what Saylor was talking about there, he said basically anybody who disagrees with that doesn't understand Bitcoin. And so the people who are telling you that Bitcoin is too risky, consider how many hours they've spent looking into this thing. Because I can say for myself and my experience here that the longer you spend in Bitcoin, the more conviction you have over it and the more you allocate from your existing portfolio into Bitcoin. And you listen to somebody like Michael Saylor, who has literally spent tens of thousands of hours. He's an engineer. He's put his money where his mouth is. And so to me, if you're following kind of the advice of the old system, people who haven't spent a whole lot of time learning about this, you're never going to catch up. You're going to be continually left behind with how you're storing your time and energy.
I think something really crazy here is you said tens of thousands of hours. Some people are probably going to say, oh, he only got into Bitcoin in 2020. But his education before that contributed to those tens of thousands of hours. Without the education before that, he wouldn't have gotten to that point. And I think that's key to remember because it gives everybody a different perspective. If he's saying that Bitcoin is not risky, and then there are other people with different perspectives, different backgrounds saying that Bitcoin is not risky, it's something that you should look into, like at the very bare minimum, something that you should look into, something you shouldn't ignore.
Yeah. Well, when you first look into it, it seems like a ridiculous idea that there's this money that's created. You don't know who created it. We don't know who Satoshi is. Those are the kind of the first things you start to learn about when you look into this, and immediately you're like, oh, this is a scam. This is just another scam, right? But the more you look into it, you start to realize, oh, proof of work makes a lot of sense. The issuance makes a lot of sense. That those coins of Satoshis have never moved. That's like a honeypot that shows just how secure this network is. It's the most secure thing ever created. The Lendy effect of this blockchain having gone on for the longest amount with immutability, you start to understand that these things are really valuable when it comes to a monetary system. And then you start questioning the monetary system we have, which is something we don't do as we grow up. We just, you put your card in, you get your money out of the ATM, people accept it, you accept it, you value it. You don't question what money is until there's something that makes you do that in your life. But then, as you go down this rabbit hole, you start to think, okay, at first I thought Bitcoin was a scam. Now I realize fiat is a scam. And it just goes full circle.
Yeah, and I think that you mentioned the honeypot there. I like thinking about when we're thinking about who's coming into this space, who's here now, how far it's come, and who's coming into it. I think that right now, specifically, it's so clear what's coming here. And what I use for this is MicroStrategy as an example of that. Because if you look at what MicroStrategy is right now, it's a lot of things. I mean, they got a lot of different tools. There's a lot of different opinions on it. That's okay. But if you look at from a big picture view of this, what is it? It's the easiest highway for this big capital to be purchasing Bitcoin. The central banks, there's two central banks. I think one is Swiss National Bank, one's maybe Poland, but they're buying a lot of MicroStrategy shares right now. And you have to ask yourself why. It's because they actually can't buy Bitcoin yet. A lot of these big funds, these big entities, they have certain rules and regulations in what they can actually invest in. And the majority of them, Bitcoin was probably after a lot of these agreements and regulations were written. So they're actually not able to hold Bitcoin yet, but they're going to be able to. And what they're doing right now is they're essentially using MicroStrategy as that highway. And so just like objectively look at that and say, okay, there's all this capital that's trapped here. It's trying to access Bitcoin. MicroStrategy is the best way to do that. So I think that MicroStrategy is kind of like the canary in the coal mine for anybody who's paying attention to this right now, saying this money's coming. It can't easily access it yet. And they're willing to pay 2x pretty much, or 3x, depending on where you look at the time frame here, to buy MicroStrategy. And so for the average person seeing that, I know that it's kind of hidden very well from the mainstream stuff, but to me that just shows like what's coming here. And you still have the ability at this point to front run those people. And I think that's a pretty big deal for the average person.
I think it's so crazy what you were saying there. The fact that so few people understand Bitcoin, and then even fewer understand MicroStrategy. There's probably what percentage of Bitcoiners do you guys think understand MicroStrategy? Maybe less than 5%.
Yeah.
What percent of
probably.
Bitcoiners understand Bitcoin?
That's true. That's a good point. Most people who own Bitcoin don't understand it. Yeah.
You know,
And to me, that just shows just such a huge opportunity here because, we've seen this asset that's gone from $500 to $10,000 to now $100,000. And some people that I've talked to in real life and, in my dealings online here, they think that, it's gone. The opportunity's gone so far because it's hit 100K. It's increased so much in the last 15 years. But if you look at both how many people, let's say that there's 1% of the population on Earth who owns Bitcoin right now. I would say like 5% of that 1% actually truly understands Bitcoin. And so even though it's gone up significantly in the last 15 years, that just shows to me like what's coming here and how much, the other 99% or 99.9% of people have to still figure this thing out. And that's kind of the disconnect here. It's not whether who's right or wrong, it's who's actually put in the work to understand this and who's understood the fact that actually, Bitcoin's not the risk here. Owning any other asset that doesn't have anything, behind it, that's the risk.
Yeah, if you look at like, I think Bitcoin is the most asymmetrical bet, right? We can see that there's an adoption curve that's happening, and we can see, I think the big thing with Bitcoin is the ultimate scarcity that it has. There's nothing else like that. Any other coin that has a supply cap could be changed. Bitcoin could not, right? So we can just say that it has ultimate scarcity compared to anything else. And we have a nominal bias. We look at Bitcoin, we say, oh, it's 100,000. That's kind of expensive. If you look at it compared to other asset classes, Bitcoin is what, $2 trillion? Gold is like $18 trillion. And not that many people even care about gold at this point, right?
What do they even use it for at this point? Gold.
Like
Sitting there.
jewelry and industrial, and then
Yeah.
it has a monetary premium on it on top of that for some reason.
Yeah.
At this point,
Most of it's just sitting there.
most of it's just sitting there, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's not even the big money. And once you start looking at the size of the real estate market globally, the size of the bond market, like people think the stock market is big, the bond market is even bigger. And if you think about the ultimate scarcity and the adoption curve, you see that money has to come from somewhere to go into Bitcoin as more and more people get into Bitcoin. So again, coming back to the risk of not owning Bitcoin, right? If money is getting sucked out of all of these other assets, then the value of those go down in nominal terms, and the value of Bitcoin is going to go up because it's taking in all of the capital or some of capital from all of these different assets. So again, you don't have to go all in like us, but it's like Saylor also has this other quote about saying like, 2% of your portfolio into Bitcoin is, flooding insurance. I think it's an insurance policy. It's not really going to get you ahead, but it's not going to leave you behind either. And I think that's probably where a lot of people need to start. And that 2% is going to grow because of the value of the Bitcoin is going to go up, but it's probably also going to grow because they're going to get more conviction and understanding of what this asset is and allow that to grow without rebalancing, or to actually start allocating more to it from their other assets.
I think the other risk here is